Oh dear. He's coming all the way from the back, so that's a very heroic entrance. Perhaps we can give him an applause already. And
thank you.
Because, well, the word has already been mentioned, of course, large language models, ChatGPT. I think we can all redo our talks because yesterday GPT-4 was released. So I don't know about you, but I'm definitely rewriting my presentation. But I can imagine that you might think like, okay, they are out there. I have a business. I have a company. I am an enterprise. How can I actually use them in my business without running all the risks and having practical use and benefit from large language models? And that's what, I have to get your name right. I dreamt about it even. Lauren Schultz.
Thank you very much.
You're a UK senior solutions consultant, but hey, if I say core AI, you know enough, right? So I'm very happy to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much.
Happy to have you here. Enjoy.
Excellent. Well, hi everyone.
Oh, you've got your lapel.
Yep, they set me up nicely, I think. So, wow, I haven't seen this many faces in an audience since I played a squirrel in Snow White play in junior school. So, yeah, and I've never done a keynote speech before, so I'm looking forward to it. But thank you all for being here today. As Mike said, my name's Lawrence Schultz. I'm from Core AI, Senior Solutions Consultant. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a neural linguistics expert, but I'm very passionate about the subject that we're going to discuss today. So what are we discussing today? The harbinger of doom, ChatGPT. We're all going to be out of a job in a year's time, apparently. No, seriously, we're here to talk about the potent combination of conversational AI and LLMs. So with that said, what is an LLM? Well, first we have to understand a language model. So I'm sure there's many a learned person here today who understands that really well. But for all the laymen of us out there, we're simply describing a language model as statistical analysis with machine learning to be able to do various downstream applications like predicting or classification, and even further beyond that, translation, stuff like that. We all, as being involved in the conversational AI industry, we have used language models probably on a daily basis. We use that to do things like intent recognition, entity recognition in our natural language understanding. So we've had language models for quite a while, all the way back to the 1970s, I believe it or not. Using mathematical concepts like n-gram, we later evolved to RNNs, recurrent neural networks, and then we had LSTM, so on and so forth. But I think perhaps the most prolific leap and bound that we've made of recent times is the advent of large language models, and that was probably first sort of iterated with BERT. So everyone might be familiar with Google's BERT. That was sort of the most prolific sort of large language model that burst onto the scene, I think in 2018 it was. And BERT made it possible to do things that we'd done with language models before, but at a much grander scale, and perhaps to a much greater accuracy as well. So when we talk about sorry, quickly reload this here. A large language model. We're talking about, sorry, let's quickly move forward here. We're talking about language understanding and language generation. So language understanding, I think we all have a fairly good idea of what that is. We want to identify what it is someone's saying to us. There is an input, a user utterance, and then we want to be able to do something with that input, so language generation. And that's what we're really seeing when you look at something like a GPT, is it's trying to generate or complete based on a sequence of words that you've given it. So when we talk about, skip forward here, LLMs contrasted with virtual assistants, something that we're all very used to on a day-to-day basis. We can see, they're broadly similar, but the way that we get to certain things is that virtual assistants can be termed as more deterministic in nature, whereas the LLMs, the raw LLMs that use them, let's say without the packaging of an application, they're more probabilistic in nature, and that's good. That's what we want from an LLM. But virtual assistants use aspects and components that are present in LLMs, so we can see natural language understanding and then a response generation. But the response generation is normally a static configuration that we've given the virtual assistant. We're not looking for dynamic responses to generate on the fly like a language model can give us. And also we have business logic as well. So business logic gets us from the user utterance or their intent to a predefined goal, so deterministic in nature. So ChatGPT, as I've probably already covered here, but ChatGPT, everyone's, I'm sure, is familiar with that. This is an example of generative AI that's underpinned by LLMs. So we can go to ChatGPT, we can chat with it, and we can get responses. We can get responses to pretty much any subject that we want. And contrast that what we just said about virtual assistant, we've trained the virtual assistant on business logic specific to user goals. So I want to check my bank balance. I want to order a product. Where is my order, for example? Whereas ChatGPT is more broad in its application. But now you're seeing the advent of lots of different applications that are being built upon, for example, OpenAI's API, that is now adding various components around that central functionality to create quite compelling use cases. So before we dive into a little bit more depth there, we can just revisit what a conversational AI platform is, and what it entails. As you can see, we've got lots of different components at play that perhaps are not present with LLMs. So channels, so the omni-channel experience that users demand of us nowadays, it's coming in through social media, from the telephone, through the IVR, whatever it may be. We need to be able to have a component within our overall package to deal with those incoming requests. And right now, as I just said, with an LLM, let's say with the GPT LLM, you're just consuming API. That's all you pretty much have, and access to the LLM via that API. We also have lots of tooling for administrators to be able to create those user journeys within the conversational AI platform. So uploading the user data to train the LM model that we have, the natural language understanding, dialogue orchestration to facilitate that journey from inception to resolution, and then all of the other components that allow us to design, build, deploy, test, analyze, and manage those conversational AI virtual assistants from that point. So how do we look at LLMs in the context of what we have today, so virtual assistants? So taking that example of intent recognition, entity recognition, NLU, lots of different vendors today use rules-based or machine learning applications of natural language understanding models to be able to take a user utterance, as we said, and convert that into a goal or intent, and the AI, the virtual assistant, then executes upon that intent. LLMs are now being used to augment the machine learning aspect of that, whereby we can use applications such as zero-shot and few-shot models to be able to take a single description of an intent and then run that against the LLM, and we get a response that is able to provide us with a high degree of accuracy what it is the user's asking for. So we no longer need to rely on vast amounts of training data with LLMs. So typically we would have had, 150 to 200 utterances, I guess, is the average amount of data that we'd use to train an average intent. With zero-shot, that's pretty much down to one. If you have a really well-defined intent, description of intent, the LLM will be able to produce quite an accurate response to you and pinpoint exactly what the user's asking for. With few-shot models as well, we're also able to, so perhaps not at the performance or capacity of a zero-shot model, but you're able to reduce the amount of data that you would use to train your your natural language understanding model by a factor of 10. So the savings that we can make in upfront training, which has typically been, it's not a trivial task. I'm sure there's lots of people in this room that understand this quite well, but it's not a trivial task to find 150, 200 points of data. You can go and trawl if you're lucky enough to have a centralized contact center system that's doing transcription, you can go and trawl that and pull it out quite quickly. But a lot of organizations don't have that. So they have to either come up with the data themselves. So these models, these few-shot and zero-shot models, are really helping to reduce the overall time to market when we're talking about developing virtual assistants. And we'll get on to more of that later. So when we're talking about natural language understanding and intent recognition, entity recognition models, there's an industry term called blank slate. So your NLU, the reason why you need those 150, 200 bits of data is to be able to train the model to an accuracy that you're happy with and deploy that. And when you're training that model, you are giving it expertise or understanding on particular subjects. So this is our analogy that we've come up with here. I think we're still working on it, but the blank slate is akin to a sparsely populated library. And you can ask the librarian, the virtual assistant, to go into that library and find specifically what it is the user's talking about. Contrast that with an LLM that has an abundance of knowledge on a broad range of subjects. We can ask the librarian in a library, let's say, on anything, and the librarian is going to give us a really convincing answer. So that's kind of sort of crystallizing or analogizing what it is to come from traditional types of natural language understanding models to more LLM-based models. But that has its disadvantages and advantages, right? In terms of scalability, as we've just talked about, it's not a trivial task to get that data and to be able to train the data as well, massage the data, do your regression testing, etc. So that's quite laborious. The quality of understanding as well, especially out of the box, is not as high as we'd find with some of the LLMs out of the box. But blank slate also has its advantages, is that we can be more specific. We have a higher level of explainability, and that's a big topic at the moment as well, and certainly in the world of generative AI. It's how do we explain how the machine got from X to Y? And especially if you're in financial services, you can't afford to take risks. You have to have the explainability there. But the LLM's advantages, as we've gone through, is the speed at which now you can develop those natural language understanding models, the quality of understanding that we get out of the box. Anyone who's used ChatGPT and asked it on any sort of any subject really, it has a high degree of understanding of what you're talking about. It might come up with, to use the term used earlier, bullshit, but it's going to give it to you very quickly, and it's going to have a good understanding out of the box. But the disadvantages, as we've seen, is significant compute power and storage is required. So it's quite expensive to run these LLMs, especially if you're doing some sort of offline research project. That's been inhibited by computational power and the costs of that. That's come down a lot because of advances in GPU technology. That's what has made LLMs possible, really. The transformer architecture in neural networks, as well as the GPU technological advancements. But again, limited explainability in that we have to be able to, especially as businesses, not just financial services, but perhaps it's most stringently tested there, but we have to be able to provide explainability as to how our machine came to a decision. I think the best analogy, this is probably better than the library one, so a conversational AI platform is akin to a car, right? We've got the wheels, we've got everything we need to go on a journey. We've got the car, we've got the body, the wheels, the engine, the axles, the gearbox, whatever we need to be able to get that car to go. Whereas an LLM is more acting as the engine powering the car, and by itself we can't go anywhere. And we look, as on the slide earlier, we talked about all of the different components that are present in a conversational AI platform. Not only, the interfaces in and out, the tooling, the analysis of what's going on in the platform as well. The current renditions of LLMs today, as I said earlier, is that, they're exposed through an API, and that's pretty much all you get. Or you can, go to Hugging Face and download your own LLM and start playing with it, but you need to build the application around it. And that's happening very quickly. OpenAI are obviously working very closely with Microsoft. Microsoft are building a whole package around it. But we at Core, we're also developing very quickly, and we've already introduced a couple of key features that are already helping lots of our customers increase the time to market in developing use cases. And that's in the natural language understanding and language generation area as well. So here's a sort of condensed view of the slide earlier. But where we're really impacting the administrator's journey, let's say in conversational AI, is the designing, the training, the testing, and the analysis phase as well. And I think later on, you're actually going to see this seep into other areas of conversational AI development as well. So with regards to integrations, we probably all understand the difficulty of, if you haven't got a coding background, of trying to get or massage a JSON payload through a REST API of one you haven't used before. Why wouldn't you use ChatGPT or InstructGPT or some sort of coding co-pilot that's going to help you understand that coding, those programming languages that you haven't seen before, or those payloads like JSON that you haven't seen before? It's going to help you not only understand it, but produce certain things for you as well. But to start with, we've impacted the designing aspect. In the Core platform now, you can actually go in, and a lot of our competitors are doing this as well, but you can go in and provide a prompt as to what type of journey you want to build in with the virtual assistant using our check bank balance from earlier. Provide a simple prompt, and all of the dialogue tasks, including the logic and the exception handling, is going to be created and populated automatically for you. So not only are we saving time in the natural language understanding area by not having to procure so much data, but also when it comes to dialogue orchestration, we can actually help with the creativity side or the data gathering side by having the LLM generate a few ideas for you as to how that journey might occur for the user. Also, in terms of I would say more simply as well, in terms of FAQ engines and things like that, those have, I think, traditionally been quite a lot easier. Organizations tend to have a knowledge base of question answers or some documents. The documents side of things has been the more challenging. How do you get data out of the documents in a structured manner and present that to the user when perhaps the documents are stored in an unstructured fashion? So we've also included in what we call our knowledge AI is the ability to use the OpenAI GPT API to quickly analyze a document and provide specific answers to the questions that users are asking. So we've impacted quite a lot of areas with LLMs. It's not just vaporware, it's not just fairy dust that's has a huge promise. But I think perhaps one of the biggest promises that LLMs are fulfilling is, we've talked a long time in this industry about democratization of AI. Being able to have our citizen developers in the organization join in on the fun of creating these AI-enabled user journeys through virtual assistants. And I think LLMs, using the functionality that I've just discussed, generating, not having to procure large amounts of data or massage that data, or being a conversational design expert, you can start to involve more people from your organization. If they know how to craft a simple prompt, then they're going to be able to provide value and get involved in building of these virtual assistants. So I think that's one of the promises, is the democratization of AI that's being fulfilled by LLMs broadly when we talk about the whole conversational AI journey here. I think, yeah, just to summarize, I mean, we've already talked about this a little bit, but with the conversational AI platform, coming back to that car versus engine analogy, you're equipped with all that you need in the platform to be able to build those journeys from start to finish. We don't have to go off and start building custom wrappers for our application and including bolted-on functionality. I think that's the key here, is that you're probably going to see the emergence of bolt-on type technologies, lightweight technologies that will fix to contact center solutions and perhaps even your some of your existing conversational AI platforms as well. But at Core, we've decided to take a build-it approach, and we're building these things into the system natively to provide an easy-to-use, intuitive experience for conversational designers, but also compounding that overall time to value, reducing the time to produce these virtual assistants. So, in summary, conversational AI platforms provide a framework for deploying and integrating LLMs, as we just talked about. We've got full control over what we're doing. So again, coming back to that principle of explainability, that in the conversational AI platform, you're going to have an audit trail. You're going to not only have an audit trail of what the developer did to get to build that journey, but also when it's being run in real time, we know what kind of responses are being generated, and we know why they're being generated as well. But when it comes to LLMs and incorporating that capability, and specifically into conversational AI platforms, we are helping to fine-tune that overall process by providing the necessary functionality to constrain the LLM so that we are reducing or completely eradicating hallucinations. You may have heard that term coming from ChatGPT. If you've used it long enough and you've had a long enough conversation, you'll see that it starts to go off on its own tangent. So some of the things that we're including is functionality to stop things like that, and that comes from clever prompt engineering, but also platform restrictions that we can put in on our side of things to make sure that that doesn't happen. But overall, you're going to see much accelerated time to market, time to value with the advent of conversational AI augmented or harmonized with LLMs. Improved accuracy as well. We mentioned the zero-shot and the few-shot models earlier as well. Out of the box, these things are producing in excess of 90% of accuracy on subjects, broad range of subjects as we talked about. And then obviously with that becomes scalability, is that because we're not so focused on gathering training data, because we're not so focused on trying to build long, complex processes, we've got the co-pilot of sorts with generative AI, the LLMs, helping us all along the way. We're going to be able to scale at a much faster rate and get to fulfill many more user journeys in much less time. So thank you. I hope that was informative, but it's certainly exciting times, and I think we've got a little bit of time for some questions. Or, yeah.
Paul? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Lawrence. And we do indeed have time for one or two questions from the audience.
There's someone at the back there.
Yeah.
I even have a microphone, so thank you. Terrific talk. I really enjoyed it, and fantastic organization. The first two talks were stunningly great, as well as the intro.
Thank you.
I have a question. I haven't rewritten my talk because of GPT-4, but I'm happy to rewrite my talk because of your talk. So I loved what you did, the emphasis on DevOps and systems approaches to AI, and just showing people what's really happening. A lot of us that have to deal with legislators and lying large companies don't get to see this kind of perspective, and it's so important. That's why I want to amplify what you're doing. Could you say a little about the controversy where certain large companies are claiming that they couldn't possibly provide sort of the requisite amount of accountable, auditable transparency into their AI if it's used as a component? So you were just talking about how you're constraining and eliminating the hallucination. Do you honestly believe that the people who are providing the LLMs couldn't also facilitate that process a little bit and give you guys better hooks? Or what do you think the situation is?
Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic question. And based on, so I tuned in for a little while last night in amongst preparing for this to the GPT-4 release. And apparently, if I'm not mistaken, they themselves have reported that they've reduced hallucinations by 86%. So I think they've already strived a long way to make that happen. But you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot more that they could be doing. I think we have to also realize that we're at a certain stage of this new technology, generative AI. A lot of the companies who are offering it, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, these are research previews. So I think, I don't want to be held to this, but I think that the research previews are there to get as much data from us as possible. They want the hallucinations, I think. They want to see and gather the data and understand why it's happening. So yes, I agree with the sentiment that there's a lot more that can be done, perhaps on their side, but perhaps it's strategically not being done in order to gather data big question in our industry, and I think Hilda also touched on it, how data really impacts us. So hopefully that was a good answer. Maybe later on in the day I can do a little bit more research.
It was a beautiful answer, but I'm just talking about in the context you have now, since you have so much concern about auditability. Is there anything they could do to help you leave that audit trail so that you could comply with the UK or the EU's concerns about this? Or do you feel like you have enough control that you don't need that extra help from them?
Well, I'm certainly speaking not generally here, perhaps, and not just on behalf of Core. But what specifically can they do? It's hard to say because the large language models and the way that they operate. They take an input and they spit out an output based upon the way that they've been designed to do that. So it's hard to say for me, not being able to look under the hood of, let's say, because the way that the LLMs are presented to us, as I said, is that it's an API at the end of the day. That's how we're consuming OpenAI's LLM. Perhaps in that intermediary there is certain functionality that we don't see that perhaps we could tune ourselves, that could be offered to developers to tune ourselves, and not just perhaps on the LLM. I think also it's the type of LLMs. I think perhaps with Google's approach, which is more bidirectional, rather than the autoregressive approach of OpenAI, there's more customizability on the Google side, I would say. Whereas on the OpenAI side, I know we're out of time. One final remark. When they use the autoregressive, it's very difficult to be able to feed back into those types of models. But certainly, I would place the focus on the intermediary. So between the LLM, the API, what is that overall application look like under the hood? And that's where I think we can target.
Isn't it this always what happens, isn't it? Like you do your talk, and then you've got that one question that you just want to keep talking about for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I do want to be mindful of our time, especially for our online community, because organization has asked me to stick to the schedule quite strictly because their streaming times depend on it. So we do have a coffee break right now until 10:35. After that, we branch out in either the ozone stage or this stage. We've got, well, do I need to mention it? Dr. Maria in ozone and Christoph over here. So it's going to be a hard choice already. But you've got half an hour to think about that and to catch up with your friends and colleagues. So see you in half an hour.